So what is user experience? So user experience, also known as UX, is founded in the late 1990s by cognitive science and user experience architecture named Don Norman, whom later became my professor and my mentor at UCSD. User experience design is a human-first way of designing products. UX design encompasses any and all interactions between a potential or active customer and a company. As a scientific process, it could be applied to anything. For example, like street lamps. It could apply to cars, or even IKEA shelving, or even Legos, and so on. The first requirement for any user experience is to meet the exact need of the customer. Just like this name is called user experience, and it's very straightforward. It's all about user's experience. After that, it comes with a simplicity and elegance that produce products that are a joy to its own, a joy to use. A true user experience goes far beyond giving customers what they say they want or providing checklist features. In order to achieve high quality user experience your company is offering, there must be a seamless merging of the service of multiple disciplines, including marketing, including graphical and industrial design, and of course, interface design. The user interface is the graphical layout of an application. It consists of the buttons user click on, the visualization that they see, the text they read, the images, the sliders, any text entry fields, and all the rest of the items that the user interact with. This includes screen layout, transitions, interface animations, and every single micro interaction. Any sort of visual elements, interaction, or animation must all be designed by a user interface designer. Usually, in a typical workflow, there's actually a user experience designer and user interface designer are very different. But some of the startup consist of making everything into one position. User interface design is a purely digital practice. It consists of all the visuals, interactive elements of a product interface, including buttons, icons, spacing, fonts or typography, color schemes, and responsive design. The goal of the UI design is to visually guide the user through a product's interface. It's all about creating an intuitive experience that doesn't require the user to think about too much. UI design transfer the brand strength and visuals assist to the product interface, making sure the design is consistent, coherent, and aesthetically pleasing. So a common question that we get asked about is what are the difference and similarity between UI and UX? Quoting Raul Vashini, whom is the founder of the Foster.fm, user experience and user interface are some of the most confused and misused terms in our field. A UI without UX is like a painter slapping paint onto a canvas without thought. While UX without UI is like the frame of a sculpture with no paper mache on it. A great product experience start with UX followed by UI. Both are essential for the product success, and I think Rao definitely explained perfectly and provide a really good example in this quote. While with the skeleton of the product mapped out, the UI designer steps in to bring everything into life. The UI designer considers all the visuals aspect of the user's journey, including all the individual screens and touch point that the users might encounter. Thinking about tapping a button or scrolling down a page or even swiping through an image gallery, that's all towards UI designer. Just to sum up everything between UI and UX, UX design is all about identifying and solving user problems. UI design is all about creating intuitive, aesthetically pleasing, and interactive interface. UX design usually comes first in the product development process and followed by UI. And the UX designer maps out the bare bones of the user journey, and the UI designer then fills it with visuals and interactive elements. UX and UI was introduced in the late 1990s, and then to be honest, it had its glory days, it had its golden age, especially when giant fan companies such as Apple, Facebook, Amazon has been introducing these great user experience or user interface designs that's been changing, I would say, the mankind's life, and it's been making it better. The primary goal of any business is to increase the sales and increase on the growth of the business, whereas UX and UI design plays an essential role in achieving this goal, and the UX UI design of the application improves the user experience and customer satisfaction that ultimately helps increase the number of use of a specific application. So now we get clear of the concept. Let's focus on some of the technical things that we can pull from user experience theory and apply them to our reports. First, let's talk about the main key components of UX and UI. So what I'm gonna do is, after explaining each point, I'm gonna quickly show a demo that I have developed on Power BI. But the idea of this demo is that since there's around 5 to 4 key concepts, I want to show you that how these key concepts can take effect onto a certain stage of the report development. And of course, that will be shown in the middle of this presentation. But yeah, so the first important key component is information architecture. Information architecture, known as the IA, is all about satisfying the business strategy by designing the application or the site's information structure. The major role of the IA is to provide its user an easy navigation no matter which browser they're using. It's all about the maximum and combination to produce the best and the top level navigation menu. So let's think about this from a report developer point of view. It's all about understanding the business requirements, from what visualization to use, the navigation, and which are the key visualizations that we need to portray. Basically, it's the architecture of the report. So let's say, for example, let me pull up a report that I have been developing. So I've been pulling up this data. I've been playing around with it. I created a very simple report. I've been pulling a lot of chart in there, and I think this is I wouldn't say this is complete, but it's almost there. So I'm going to quickly show you what are the difference between the default report and the information architecture. So this is the information architecture. It's, as you can see, it's very simple. It's a little bit different compared to the default report. However, as you can see, what I did is that I divided each sections into different sections. So for the blue sections, I changed this into navigation bar. For the purple section, I changed this to KPI bar. For the yellow section is basically the general information bar. So from user experience theory, we have this this way that where the users either they look from left to right or top to bottom. So in this case, that they're gonna look at, they're gonna focus on the navigation bar first because that's left, and then they're gonna slowly work towards to the right section. And on the right section, they're gonna go from top to bottom. So what top to bottom is, basically the KPI bar is where we want to portray our most important information. And of course, KPI bar, the key performance indicator, definitely outportray the general information bar, where we want to use the KPI bar to show which one are the most key performance indicators and we want to show to the company or to the end user. Whereas the general information bar contains different section of the other reports. For example, like as you can see, the table or different like a pie chart and so on. It is definitely very useful. So the second key component is interaction design. Interaction design is all about creating the conceptual design which the users interact with the report. We can use the interaction design to highlight some of the important part of our report to make it pop out for our end users. The idea of interaction design is to use color illusions such as dark color, mask light color, or layout order to highlight key features as well as providing an aesthetic pleasing look. However, furthermore, in report development, interaction design is also about introducing buttons, introducing bookmarks, selections, and even different tools that helps our reports to become interactive. I definitely, since my last presentation on report buttons, on selection, and so on, bookmarks, this is where interaction design is all about. So let's go back to the Power BI report. As you can see, information architecture is all about dividing each visualization and separating them into different selections, interaction design is all about creating buttons for different bookmarks. So as you can see here, I created 2 buttons, but basically this button connects to connects to a website, as you can see, and then another button basically toggles on and off regarding to the map of different function. As you can see, it's all about toggling on and off. So interaction design is all about creating different interactions. It's basically the hyperlink of the buttons, or for example, creating different interactions and so on. The next key component is about usability. Usability can be referred as the user friendliness as well, along with figuring out if the users gets the information they want by the application or visiting the site for the first time, and if the application website is easy to navigate. The usability also comprehends the way to handle the errors. So converting that into report development is not just slapping a bunch of visualizations on the blank canvas, but rather if these visualization makes sense to the users. It's like telling a story with different visualization, but more is the end user is making the end users too easy to navigate around those visualizations. In DesignMind, we actually have this rule, is that we have the 10-second rule, but basically it's the rule is that it's if we develop a report and the users look at it for 10 seconds, they need to make sure that they understand what the report is about and what is the report is telling them. And that's the rule that we have been using at DesignMind. So as you can see, for the usability, if I switch to usability, as you can see, we've been adding some of the key information. We've been adding some of the, as you can see, it's different from interaction design. We've been adding a lot of the title, we've been dividing a lot of header title. As you can see here, we have been introducing some of the data values. We've been making everything prettier. We've been adding a lot of filter panel, but basically the idea here is just to, from interaction design to usability, is that in usability, we want to make sure that our users are able to understand what's going on to this report. And then at this page, they should be already able to understand it. They should be able to see, to make decision out of it. And then after usability is all about visualizations or visualization customization, as well as aesthetically pleasing or improvements. So the next one is give me 1 second, let me bring up the PowerPoint. The next one is about wireframing. Wireframing is all about creating a sample of the application to test the features. It also tests the look and the usability of the application before it's actually launched. It is the cheapest way to test functionality and evaluate if the application service serve the purpose. So in report development, we don't really use wireframing. The reason why we don't use wireframing is because it's an extra step. It's a step that we do not need. It does take a little bit of time because you're creating a wireframe, or what we call it, the low fidelity prototype. But basically, the idea here is that when you create in the UX world, you have to create a low fidelity prototype, send it to the users, or do some user testing, and they see that any changes that they don't like, or anything that they prevents them having an error, everything will get changed. In report development, usually a report development flow is that to be able to design MVP, which is also known as a minimal viable product, which it consists the skeleton of the report. And after we create the skeleton of the report, we are able to make changes and upgrades based on the client's feedback. So after we create the skeleton, usually the client will provide us the feedbacks, and that's where the communication between our report developers and the clients happens, is that we need to understand that we need to focus on clients' requirements, their business requirements, and then everything they need from us. We have to make sure that we satisfy them, which is very, very important. just like what I mentioned at the very start, instead of creating a report, we are ultimately, as a report developer, we are providing a service to our clients, and we need to keep the communication clear in order to create a product that's a vision, as well as kind of upgrading and satisfying their needs. And lastly, what we have is a visual design. Visual design of the application or the website is like defining the company's brand. Finalizing the visual design can affect the user's behavior and enhance it. Enhance it is the most important component of the UI design. Visual design is not only about selecting the best image, color, icons, fonts, but also identifying the appearance of the application impact the interaction of its users. So I would say that from wireframing usability and up, so that's information architecture to wireframing, it's all about the structure of the reports, whereas visual design is all about finalizing the reports. It's all about aesthetics. It's all about making sure everything is aligned, making sure the color scheme is right, making sure the font you're using is the right font. It's basically, just making sure that your user experience, gets step up a level. It's very straightforward. And again, everyone has his own unique creativity. There is no right or wrong way to create a visual design. As long as we suit the client's requirements, and as well as we've been applying some of the heuristics, which I'll be talking in a bit. I think everyone has his unique creativity, and I think that's great. So let me show you what that does, what that look like for the visual design, what I designed, as well as my creativity. So as you can see, this is my final copy of the report. This is where I decided to change everything a little bit to make sure that everything looks nice. Again, just to quickly explain the reports, this is a COVID related report using a dummy data. On the left side here, we have the navigation bar. On the top side here, we have the key performance indicator, as you can see. On the bottom here, we have the general information, which includes all the information that we've been pulling. It contains information, for example, top 5 confirmed by country and region. It can be total active and total death by month, and even confirmed recovery and death by month. So as you can see, this is usually a standard reports that I create. Again, this is my aesthetic. I know, again, everyone has his own uniqueness, so I definitely respect that. But this is usually, as you can see here, from the default, which is the default report that we've been pulling up, and from each stage to different stage, as you can see, the report has certain improvements on each stage. As you can see here, it's been designing. After usability, you have the whole entire structure already. Everything seems to be ready, and by visual design, you're just kind of putting on the makeup a little bit more, and then make sure that everything is nice. Just a key trick, a little cool trick that I'll be introducing is that make sure that everything is aligned. Definitely, I think making sure everything aligned is very great. What I like to do is that I like to create I like to use this what do you call this? This is a square box. So to use a square box is very straightforward. All you have to do is go to Insert ribbon, and then go to Shapes, and then go to Rectangle. And then, as you can see, you can drag this and make this a little bit bigger. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn on, for example, you're gonna actually turn off fill, and then you're gonna turn on background, and then you're gonna make sure that the background it could be like a certain color. What I like to do is I like to make this background just a little bit lighter, and then maybe change the transparency a little bit. And then what we're gonna do is that we're gonna also turn off the line, and then we're gonna change this. We can even turn this line off. We can just turn this off and set the transparency to 100. As you can see, what that does is that gives a little bit it kind of gives a little bit of structure of the report, but basically it kind of filters just like the visual design. As you can see on the left, it shows like a navigation bar, whereas the right side, it contains a little bit more on the visualizations. And then that focus on the left to right theory, which the user will look at the navigation bar first, and then they will look at this gray bar second. Or what I like to do is that I like to do the top-down bar option, which you can technically you can have something like this, where you can have a logo. I can just quickly pull a logo in here. So we're gonna copy this logo and we're gonna paste this. And as you can see, you can have slicer on the top and then you can have visualizations on the bottom. This uses the top-down theory, which is the user focus on the top first, and then it works its way down. And then again, just to quickly show you a demonstration that I can quickly copy this. What I did is that I changed the background of this visualization to white. To do that, you can go to the custom and format, and you can go to background, and then you can change this to white. And then as you can see, you can change this to even blue. But the idea here is that you want to have a dark color and white color contrasting each other, just so that it provides, it gives the graph a little bit more highlights. It gives them a little bit depth. At the same time, this is like an illusion trick made by Power BI, just so that users are able to kind of create their creativity a little bit. What you can also do is that you can also create using a Photoshop or any other, or even using Paint. You can technically create an image or like a Photoshop in or even like a InDesign like a format. You can technically pull an image and then using that image as a background. Just kind of like the same concept as this black shape. Sorry, this gray shape. But basically everything here is kind of like an illusion, which is actually very, very useful. So just to also another tip and tricks, when you're using this, make sure that you are using the order right. Because for example, what that means is that if you go to format, if you go to view, and then if you go to selection, as you can see here, this is where the order selection kind of comes in. Ordering in Power BI is very important, because what that means is that if, for example, as you can see here, the shape is currently under the conform and recovered. If I move the shape above this, it means that it will cover up the whole entire thing. The reason why this is showing is because that we set this transparency to, I think we set this transparency to 51. So let's say that if we set this to 0, it will block out the entire shape. And then if we bring this back a little bit, the overlay, this will overlay the top, the shape. It will order above the shape, meaning that you're able to see this. Make sure that your ordering level is correct, because if this is not correct, sometimes you can be forgotten. Like for example, there's like a slicer or like a small visualization, you accidentally forgot about it. Then that's and then you kind of just lost it because you can't keep track of this. So what I like to do is that at the end, I like to set the shape and the logo, or even text, I like to put them in the bottom, just so that all the visualizations are above them, so they don't get cut out, or they don't get they don't have any layer errors, which is I think that's one of very useful tips for report development. Awesome. So we talked about the core components of user theory, and I really hope that everyone here is able to use these kind of theories. Now let's talk about some of the general principle for interaction design. And these 10 principles, it basically is something that I use when I do user interface design. It's not only these kind of rules not only applies on reports, but any user interface in general. So when you're designing, for example, even like let's say PowerPoint, you can use some of these principles or principles, and then you can use them in your designing, just so that you're able to provide some of the best user interface and so on. They are called heuristics because they are the broad rules of thumb, and they're not specifically usability guidelines. So meaning that they are not always used. It really depends on situational, and again, it really depends on users' creativity. Sometimes you can use this, sometimes you don't. For report development, some of these you don't really have to use them, but because Power BI already have them, because Power BI again it's a tool, and it's in the Power BI service, it already kind of covers some of these heuristics. But let's get started. So the first one is visibility of system status. So what that means is that the design should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback with a reasonable amount of time. So remember when I talked about the 10-second rule? So this is perfectly the visibility of system status, meaning that what that does is that you need to give users like a quick amount of time, allowing them to understand what the report is about. Just like the report what I mentioned, and then the 10-second rule that we have in DesignMind is that we need to give users 10 seconds, and then after 10 seconds, they need to kind of understand what is going on. If we fail to do that, that means that we need to change our report a little bit. We need to enhance that report a little bit. We need to add in titles. We need to change the layouts. We need to change out the positions. Definitely, this is one of the most important things to keep in mind. A tip for this is that communicate clearly to users what the system state is. Present feedback to the users as quickly as possible, and definitely build trust through open and continuous communication. As long as you have an open communication between you and the users, you are definitely good to go. The second one is to match between system and real world. And this is also very important. But this one is very situational. What that means is that the design should speak the user's language. It should also use words, phrases, and concepts familiar to the users, rather than internal jargon, follow real world conventions, making information appear in a natural and logical order. So sometimes the reason why I say we don't have to use this all the time is because this is definitely based on users' requirements. Let's say that let's use the word user experience for a second. If I put in a report, so let's say that if I have a title, let's say that if I have a visual under, you know what? Let me pull up the Power BI report and do a quick demonstration. So if I go to visual design, let's say that if I use KPI indicator, and then instead of KPI indicator, I'm just going to use KPI. As a users, and then let's say a user who does not understand KPI, when they look at KPI, they're going to be like, what is this? You know, when they look at the report, they're going to be like, what is KPI? I don't understand what is KPI. But the difference between a jargon, or like for example, like KPIs and key performance indicator, is that if I change this to key performance indicator, then they will be able to understand what is going on, and that could be applied to anything. Like it could be applied to user experience as in UX, user interface as in UI. But the idea here is that not everyone understand these jargon means, unless it's, it is internal, unless the user clients doesn't really matter, doesn't really care, because everyone internal already kind of understand what these terms already means. But usually on default, you should always have the full word out, because it's just in order to match the system and the real world. We want the users to be able to understand everything. They shouldn't question what a certain jargon means. And again, of course, everyone's different. So that's very important. I definitely use that rule for sure, and I think that's a great rule to use. The next one is user control and freedom. So this one is very interesting, and I don't use this often in report development, but I definitely use this in my user interface design. Is that this is about user often perform action by mistake. That's on default. Not everyone's perfect. Sometimes people make mistakes, and that is okay. But however, as a user designer or user interface designer, after they made a mistake, we need to help them prevent that mistake. Usually, for example, that this means that it's clearly marked emergency exit to leave the unwanted action without having to go through an extended process. What that means is that, for example, this doesn't really apply to report development, especially in Power BI, is that, let's say that in a scenario, let's do a persona. Let's say that users is looking at a report development, or is looking at a report on Power BI service. They accidentally chooses the wrong filter, and they want to how do they fix this? How do they want to change it back? Is there a button that allows them to just a single click of button and then kind of change everything to default? Yes, there is, as many of you already understand, Power BI service, there is a button called Reset to Default, and that is designed by Microsoft. What that button does is that once you click that button, the report will go back to the original state. So very, I think Microsoft here has already done a great job on, user control and freedom, because it allows them to, allow them users to able to go back to their mistakes and change back to the original state. And then again, this is also doable in Power BI. Power BI desktop is basically you can technically create a bookmark. So let's say that we can create a bookmark. We can call this, let's call this reset. And then what we're gonna do is that we can actually insert a button. We can do a reset button. And then we're gonna change this. We're gonna make this a little bit smaller. We can actually change this into the filter panel, and we're gonna go to action here, and then we're gonna go to bookmark, and then we're gonna change this to reset. What that does is that if let's say for example, if I have different filter on, and then what if let's say that I made let's say that here that like pretend that we have a lot of slicer or a lot of filters on this page, and then we can't even track all the filters that we have, and then let's say that the question is I want to go back to the original state, I want to start over. How can I do that? Obviously I'm not going to go back to each slicer and then change, unclick everything, to make sure that we unclick everything. We can actually use the bookmark system to click on this and then change this back to the original state. That is very, it's definitely something that we provide to the users to allow them to have a better access of the reports, allowing them to change back to original states in order to prevent or even help them to clear any mistakes that they made throughout their use of this report. The next one is consistency and standard. So this one is very straightforward. Users should not have to wonder what words, situations, or action mean the same thing, followed by platform and industry conventions. But basically here is very, it's very straightforward. Let's say that you have two reports. Let's say that you have two reports. The first report, you have the first tab, you have the top and down kind of situation. And the second report, what you're gonna do is that you should always have the top and down. You should always be consistent. You shouldn't have something like, for example, you shouldn't have something like this on the second tab, because that just defeats the purpose. You want to make sure that everything is consistent. You want to make sure that the font is consistent, the color scheme is consistent, everything is consistent. Make sure that you're using using everything, everything is right. Currently, one tip and tricks is that we are using a great way to use is that after a report development is finished, you can actually use a JSON file or a template or Power BI template offered by Microsoft, or even a customized JSON file. I know that we currently DesignMind, we are in process of developing our own unique JSON file, our own unique template. But the idea here is that you should always take advantage of the template here, because these templates are very, very useful. They have been approved by Microsoft. They have been designed by many user interface designer with a lot of great color schema. With just a click of button, you're able to change everything, which is awesome. You don't have to worry about inconsistency. You don't have to worry about not being aligned to everything. You just have to make sure that the layout is correct. Other than that, you don't have to anything to worry, which is also very, very useful. The next one is error prevention. I think this is also a little bit tricky to use, but it's something you can do with Dax, and I'm going to quickly show you what I mean by that. Error prevention means good error messages are important, but the best design carefully prevent problems from occurring in the first place. Either eliminate error-prone conditions, or check for them and present users with a confirmation option before they come into the action. So what that means is that, what does that mean? Is that when they, it's very similar to the number 3, which is the user control and freedom. But basically the idea here is that we should, if there is a system in Power BI that allow users to prevent any errors, we should take advantage of that. So actually, we do have something like that in Power BI. But basically the idea here is that we can actually use Dax the cool thing about Power BI and which I really love about Power BI is that we can use Dax measurements to create a certain logic KPI cards, and then but basically use a specific logic and then kind of use that logic to produce any outcome. So let me show you a quick DAX that I built up here. It's very straightforward, but basically it's using an if statement. And the logic here is that if the province and state is filtered and a logic and country region is filtered, then concatenate between the values of the province state and also the values of the location. If this requirements is not met, then produce the outcome. Please select the filters from both province and country. So as you can see here, if I don't have anything select under the province and country, and then as you can see here that it's going to give us an error message saying, please select the filters for both province and country. And let's say that if I have something just selected as one, as Beijing, as you can see, nothing here is selected. As you can see here, is nothing here is selected. And then if I select China, however, that changes. So we can do another quick persona. As a user, I select Beijing and I forgot to select country. And then I'm realizing, I look at this KPI card and I'm just like, hey, why is it not showing me the final result that I wanted? And I look at this text and I'm like, oh, it's because I haven't selected country. So, and then I'm going to go ahead and select country. And then voila, that gives us the final answer. So again, that's what I really like about DAX is because you can use these things to portray, any outcome, and then, as well as able to prevent any error, to create any error prevention, which I think is another great way to use Power BI. And I think that's another way to another highlight or features that Power BI offers, which is very, very useful. And then I know that we're kind of over the time limit here. I'm just gonna quickly explain them a little bit. Number 7 is all about flexibility and efficient of use. But basically is just creating any buttons or bookmarks that speed up the interaction for the expert use, such as design that can cater to both inexperienced and experienced users, allowing users.
Chennie, excuse me. I think we've got another, like if you're just going through it at the pace you're going at, how much more time would you need?
I would say just like 15 minutes or 10 minutes. They're not that any long. They're just very simple.
I think you just ought to go at your current pace. I think you're doing great. And
okay, awesome.
I think you should just continue if that's all right with everybody.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mark. So I can finally relax a little bit. But for flexibility and efficient views is basically it's very simple. It's basically allowing users to go to point A to point B without any hustle. The reason is that if, for example, if we go back to the reports and let's say that if we go back to the visual design tab, the idea here, or even the usability, the interaction design here. In interaction design, we introduced these buttons. The idea here is that, for example, let's say that user want to see the map and they don't want to go to like another tab to see it. They just want to go toggle on and off. They can just click on map and then it will take them to the map section. It's very straightforward, very easy to use. Basically, the idea here is to provide flexibility and efficient use for users. But basically allow users to to have customizations, allow users to have very straightforward options. Again, that kind of just ties into the whole entire concept of user experience, is that we want the users to have the best experience when using our report. We don't want them to go through hassles to add any additional steps. Everything they should use, they should be very straightforward. They shouldn't go any buttons and then go to another buttons. It's definitely very easy to use. Again, you can definitely create this in another tab. But what I like to do is that I like to create my report as an app. I like to, show users, and at the same time show the users, to educate the users what Power BI can do, because Power BI compared to any other app, it's definitely it's still an improving app. It's a very new app. It has a lot of great features coming out every month. I think as a Power BI report developer, it is also our duty to kind of show off what Power BI can do, and then what these things that we can do, and along with user experience theories, we can help users to create some of the best reports out there. And I think this is our role for report development, and I think this is why I really like about report development. And then I've been constantly telling Mark, as I give me more report development jobs. I really like doing this, is because I think this is wonderful. I think I really truly like doing reports. And I think with all these updates coming every month on Power BI, I really like it. I think each month they introduce new features, and I'm just like, wow, this is great. This is awesome. But the next couple ones is that for the slide here is that creating a static and minimalist design. I think this one's very straightforward. Interface should not contain information which is irrelevant or really needed. Every extra unit of information in an interface competes with the relevant units of information and diminish their relative visibilities. So it's very simple. So very straightforward is that when you're designing an interface, don't put too much visuals onto one page. Don't make it too complex. Leave it some white space, just so that you have a great contrast. I've seen a lot of users who's just slapping a lot of visualization onto one tab, and it's just too much. They make the report a lot bigger. They just slap everything on there. If you need to create different tab, if you need to create different buttons, different views, don't slap all of the visualization onto just one single page. That's one is that it's definitely not aesthetic. It definitely gives a overwhelming look to the users, and I think this is this is a trend that all these big companies have been using. Everything's minimal, and everything should be minimalistic. Everything should be straightforward. Everything should be easy to use. The more minimal, the more simple it is, the better it is. And then the second key thing is that if you're slapping a lot of visualization onto one report tab, it's actually you're decreasing the performance rate of the Power BI reports. Just because I know that Power BI uses the engine, I think it's called Vertipack. And pronounce I'm sorry if I butcher the name, but I believe it's called Vertipack. But the idea here is that the more visualization that you have on one tab or on your on your reports, the more it affects the Power BI performance. So that's also one thing to keep in lookout for. And then that's one thing that's more towards the optimization path, but it's definitely something to be keep in mind. And then one thing is the next thing is help users with error. So for help user with error, it's very straightforward. It's basically error message should be expressed in plain language, precisely indicate the problem, and I think this is to be honest, this is a little bit something that Power BI, just from personal experience, I think this is something that Power BI could work on. I'm pretty sure many of you are very familiar with Power BI, and when you're using Power BI, you're definitely gonna experience some sort of error message at one point. And I think, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing about Power BI. It's just that Power BI is very precise. You need the right informations, or else you're gonna have some error message popping up. And I think that applies to not just have Power BI, a lot of application out there. But however, Power BI often gives you an error message that's been very complex. It's been very, it was very complex. And then when I look at the error message, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, you look at this error message, you're like, what is this? Even though it's explaining details, but it's not. It's hard to recognize the error message, and I'm not sure if this is just me or is this everyone. But again, since what I like to do, I have to research the error message to get out what is they're saying, But I think this is something that Power BI should definitely keep in mind. I think that would be great in the future. And lastly, as a user report developer or like a report developer, we need to have help and documentation. It's the best if the system doesn't, it's best if the system doesn't need any additional explanation. However, it is very necessary to create a documentation for your report, just so that, in the future, if someone else takes over the report and they need to go back to the report to change the report a little bit, they have the right material. And I think that's definitely one of the key concepts of a report development, because, because it's something that you should always have. You 100% must have, because if you don't have that, it's hard to track everything down in the future. And then whenever possible, present the documentation in context right at the moment as the user require it. It's very, very useful. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I know there's so much topics I've covered. I definitely need to drink a lot of water. But I definitely hope that many of you or everyone has been learning some sort of useful and the user experience according to the user experience theory. I really want to, I want to make sure that user experience, in report development, definitely, have a higher position than to most report developers, because a lot of report developers out there definitely ignore user experience, because it's very hard to be honest. It's very hard to think about everything. It's very hard, but so they tend to ignore this. But however, I think what I like to do is that I like to make sure that it's good for the users. I want to make sure that they're able to create reports to satisfy a lot of clients' needs, very beautiful reports. And I want someone to create, I want a lot of people to create reports to motivate each other and to inspire each other, and to create a better reports. And then I think that's what I really want to do. And I think that's something that I want to do. What I want to do as in DesignMind as well, is that I want to make sure that we have a lot of future. I want to have different. I want everyone here is that to create very good reports. Everyone to inspire each other. To create all sorts of creativity. And I really enjoy everyone's creativity here. But thank you so much. If I think I'm good here, Mark. I'm ready to answer some questions.
Great. Thank
Before
you.
I do that, let me turn on my lights. Okay, awesome.
Okay, thank you, Chennie. Well done, and lots of really great feedback in the chat, and thanks everyone for that. Before we get into questions, and there are a few questions here. Daryl Moffat pointed out that there's the Power BI Summit that's being put on by Radicad, and I put a link in the chat for that. That is coming up in just a few days. It's April 18th through 23rd, and that is Reza, Rad, and Layla. I'm not sure her last name, but they're married. And Reza has spoken to this group several times, and he'll be speaking again in the pretty near future. And but right now he's focused on getting this summit off to a successful start and conclusion. And there are other events but there's a link to it that I posted in the chat. Thank you, Daryl. And then we have Ashraf commenting to Chennie, you are, and this has been a topic of discussion, you are one of the very few visual designers or visualization designers who still use pie chart. Any thoughts to share on that? Because we hear all the time, no pie charts, and then there you are.
No pie charts, right? So I think that's I get it actually. I think I've been definitely hearing throughout my client, my time being a designer, is that why using pie chart? The reason why I like to use pie chart or even donut chart is that a pie chart for me it allows to express a part to whole relationship in your data. So what obviously I'm also a pie lover, but I think of pie chart as a whole pie. It's like, each slice represents, a component, and then when all the slices add up together, it creates a whole. I think just because of that concept, I like to use pie chart because, when we let's say if I pull up my example, I like to use this because I want to see, let's say that, it's a visually, yes, I can use bar chart and everything, but rather using a pie chart to express that each slice, the ratio between each slice amongst each other. And I think, we can do this in bar chart, but I think pie chart to me is more visually appealing. And I think, I'm a little bit, for me, I'm a little bit OCD. I like to, this is kind of strange, but I like to see when everything fits in together as a whole. And then to me, that gives me the satisfaction of, and again, I think that's my OCD kicking in. But I think that gives me like a very satisfied function. But again, ultimately, a pie chart provides us the comfort as a part to whole relationship. And I think that's definitely very important here. Again, for this pie chart here, I actually use a special filter where I did a top 5. But let's say that I only use pie chart if something is top 5. Let's say that if I take this as just like a basic filtering, and actually if I just take this out, as you can see, this is, to me, this is too much. I think this is where pie chart is very it's not that great. I don't think that's very useful, and then this is where bar chart comes in.
So you would look at the data, and you might look at the chart before you would decide you're really going to use the pie chart.
Right. And for example, let's say that if someone asked me like, Chennie, I want to see the top 5. I only want to see the top 5 of this. Top 5 of this. Sure. No, I mean, if let's say that for example, let's say that if I quickly do a quick introduction here. Let me quickly bring this. If I bring a pie chart here, and then let me quickly do a bar chart as well. So let's say that if I do, if I kind of just take out, I guess I can actually take out this. And let's say that if I want to do, I think this is country and region. Let me see if I put a legend here. Oh. So let's say that, for example, here, like, if you have two reports here, like if you have two visualization here, with many data, and then of course if you look at over here, and I'm gonna quickly turn this data labels off because it's kind of confusing. Of course the bar chart will allow you to portray a lot of very, it gives you a lot of different information, and when you look at the bar chart compared to the pie chart, obviously you're gonna choose the bar chart because it's great, you have all sorts of information. However, let's say that if you're using if you're filtering this by top 5 or top 3, let's say that if we're doing top 3, for example, if I do this, and then I believe I'm using max confirmed, and then I'm going to use this as I'm going to do the same thing here. I think I'm also using, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do top n 3, and then I think I'm going to do confirm here. I'm going to quickly actually delete these ones. Oh. So, like for example, if I meet things like this, I like to use this one. I think it's just personal preference, because for this one, let's say that if you only have like limited amount of numbers, and I think you should only use pie chart if the number is 5 or below. I just feel like pie chart definitely portray that part to whole relationship, whereas the other one, yes, you get the satisfaction, you get everything. However, as a user experience, like let's say that if we put this onto visual design, if we delete this, and then if we put this here. Sorry, my Power BI desktop is a little bit slow. Let me copy this, and then let me go to visual design. If you only have 3, you're gonna get something like this, where the bar chart is gonna be incredibly big. And then to me, I don't really like that. I just feel like it's a little bit, the size compared to everything else is very different. And again, I have OCD, so I think that's also a reason why I don't like it. But on the other hand, if you have a bar like a pie chart, I think you get that satisfaction where it's like a whole, everything aligns together and you create this whole circle. And to me, I think that's really great. But again, personal preference, and I think I think it's mostly my OCD kicking in.
Okay, so it sounds like there are situations where they're really custom situations where you know what's going to happen, where you might do that.
Right. Right.
So from Nandan, if the user makes a selection in the slicer and the report is taking some time to recalculate and render, how do you show the status to the user? Is there a way to do that?
Let me see the question. Give me 1 second. So if the user makes a selection in this, is this the Nandan one?
Yep.
Okay, if the user makes a selection in the slicer and the report is taking some time to recalculate and render, how do you show the status to the user? So Nandan, could you please elaborate a little bit more on that question? If the user makes a selection in the slicer.
Yes, so the question is, sometimes the user changes something in the slicer,
yeah,
and it's taking a long time for the visualizations to refresh. Just because there are a lot of measures and it's calculating. Is there a way to show the user that it's still chugging along?
As in like it's still filtering, or is it still calculating?
That is still calculating, because to the user it seems like nothing has gotten updated on the page.
Right. So I think when you're when you're changing a filters, obviously for here it's a little bit different, but I know that Power BI on default is that when something is updating, there is a little cycle bar on the top left corner, and I'm not sure. Right. But
it's easy to miss, because I've seen users, they don't see that cycle bar and they think nothing's changing. I was wondering if there's a widget or something to show that something is still in progress.
So I think that's a great question. I don't think I know any sort of way. I think this is kind of towards the how Power BI is built. I can definitely do more research and get back to you. However, this is definitely related to I think that's the structure of Power BI. The one way I can think of this is that it's to build a Dax measurement. But basically, you can actually build a Dax measurement to kind of show. Let me see if I can create. I can pull up some of my old reports. But basically, you can actually use Dax measurement to show what filters that you have been using. And then you put that Dax measurement into a KPI card. But basically what that does is that I'm pulling out my Power BI report. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, yeah, Ashraf pointed out that it's Leila Etadi, that's her last name, who is Reza's wife and partner in that Power BI summit coming up. Thank you, Ashraf. And Christian commented, again, while Chennie's working on that, pie chart is good if it shows the percentage and the total. Frank commented, background picture seems to make Power BI large. Can you comment on how to minimize? Well, this is a question, so we'll come back to that.
Okay, awesome. So here you go. Here over here is that you have like this filter. I have like this bar right here, and this is actually built by a Dax measurement. So if we look at the filter real quick, it's very simple actually. It's basically looking at the logic here is that it's using the if statement and basically saying that if the country and region is filtered, then show this text string and then concatenate between the country and the location, followed by the comma. So over here is that the idea here is that I'm not sure this will satisfy your requirements of showing when the user this is loading, but what this does is that if, let's say that if I filter something here, it will tell me which filter is which slicer is selected, as you can see here. So my way of solving your problem is that like we can technically create a Dax. Meanwhile, I don't have any solution that kind of builds on like actually telling the user like a pop-up message telling the user it's still loading. We can technically create something like this. I'm assuming that if this is not since this text box right here, it's also cross filtering between the slicer and then as well as the text box. If the text box is finished, meaning that this text, if the slicer is finished, computing, then this text box will appear, right? And then let's say that if this is not appeared, if the text box does not appear, then you can technically create like a default text saying that it's still calculating or please select a filter. So that way, it kind of sort of providing our users some insight to kind of tell them like whether this is this is finished calculating or not. So I think this is like one of the workarounds to this. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't give you a full answer on this because I really don't think that there's a way to change. I think this is just how Power BI is built.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashraf had also added the comment about this. The problem is that the spinning time varies from a chart to another in the same page. So no perfect solution available.
Right.
Okay, and Frank had brought up background pictures seems to make Power BI large. Can you comment on how to minimize file size when using pictures for a background? So he's referring to file size when he says Power BI large.
Right. So I know for Power BI, from optimization standpoint, I feel like I can definitely get into very details of this. What I mentioned that if you, of course, the more visualization, the more stuff you bring into Power BI, the bigger the reports. Very self-explanatory. But when it comes to image backgrounds, I think the only way to eliminate the size or reduce the size is actually to change the resolution for this. Meanwhile, that's a great way to do so. Another way to do this is to change the page size a little bit to make it a little bit smaller, but I don't recommend doing that. But if you're planning to use the image background for for the background, I think the best way to do this is that it's to change the resolution a little bit by using like an online file formatter, or what you can do is that you can actually change the transparency of that background image just a little bit lighter, just so that it doesn't portray all the color outcome. And that's a little bit way to reduce the size, but however, it's not like a huge drastic change. I think the huge drastic change is definitely change the resolution of the image a little bit. But I think that's kind of like a sacrifice thing, is that if your image is very detailed, you want to show a detailed image, you have to sacrifice the resolution, then I don't recommend you doing so. However, if you're just gonna use color, color background, then I think losing that resolution should be fine. Yeah, but using the transparency method also work, but not a lot. I actually did this a little bit testing on myself. It's not like a huge change, but just changing the transparency, also allowing them to change the color code a little bit, so which is slightly better.
Okay, then Subose asks the question: have you seen BI? So I assume she's referring to Power BI, following a process to interject into an automated process that calls for standardized displays. It's a long question. So it calls for standardized displays from report to report, like daily, weekly, churn, or new sales report, with information that might need human intervention or customization to draw attention of stakeholders. So for example, perhaps each week we display some data as a bar chart, but in 1 week it might make more sense to display the data as a pie chart to show interestingness of a new data point. Have you come across situations in how BI teams handle these cases?
Okay. So this one is interesting. So this one is kind of I'm not sure if this one is very interesting because it's asking you to change the report aspect from a bar chart to a pie chart. The only way, there's a couple ways I've been thinking is this, like the first way is that I'm not sure if this one will work, but we can look into Microsoft Flow. But again, I don't know if that will work. That will allow you to change the dynamic of the report. But I think Microsoft Flow could be one of the options. The other option is definitely you're thinking more like an automated process, right? I'm assuming that you're thinking of this more as an automated process, but I think another way to do this is to create another tab and then basically I'm not sure. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here that technically what we can do is that because when we're publishing a report, it's allowing us to show for example, if let's say that if we are on a certain tab and we publish that report onto the Power BI service, the default view of that tab is going to be on the tab where you publish when you're hovering on it, right? Let's say that is there a possible way to use Flow to kind of show which tab you're on and then automatically publish that report to the Power BI service, meaning that let's say that for example you're on tab 1, right? And then you publish the report on the Power BI service, it will show you tab 1 first. And then let's say that I'm not sure if this one will work again. If you use some sort of flow method or some sort of method, and then basically allowing Power BI to go to tab 2 and then publish that report again, to auto refresh that report again, it will go to the default view will go into view 2. So I think that's one of the way to look into this problem, and I think this is just one of the way. I'm not sure this will 100% work, but I will definitely look into this, and we can definitely take this offline or through email. For sure. Again, user interactivity, might actually be the answer. Is that like let's say that, for example, for week 1 you want to show all of these kind of information, and week 2 you want to see the map or you want to see other visualizations. Definitely buttons and bookmarks is definitely one of the options here. The downside, just looking at your question is that it's not automated. It is that something users will have to click on it to toggle on and off. But it is a solution.
Good night, everyone.
Awesome. Good night, everyone.